everybody, and this is another Sparkenation conversation. If you're watching one of these for the first time, just a reminder that a Sparkenation is a spark that ignites passion that leads to action that changes what's normal. I'm thrilled today that my guest is my friend and colleague, Sue Heatherington. She's in the UK, she's down in Wales, in a wonderful part of the world, and her and her husband Steve have a lovely property there, 40 acres, I think, Sue, that's called the Waterside.
That's right.
But the reason that we're here today is we're looking at what's the role of the quiet disruptor in the new world of work. Sue's written a wonderful book called The Quiet Disruptor, and it's really about how do thoughtful and creative change makers have the courage to speak softly about things that matter and create change without shouting. And I thought, Sue, that we'd begin today because before you wrote the book, The Quiet Disruptor, you wrote a manifesto, which I think is quite brilliant. And I thought we might start our conversation there if that's a place you think we should begin.
I think that's a really good place to begin. And Ian, it's lovely to be talking to you. In my time this morning, in your time this evening, I understand.
Indeed, I'm at 7:15 p.m. in Australia, down in Victoria, so we're Australian daylight savings time in this part of the world.
Yeah, good. Well, we're just waking up to a Welsh drizzly morning, going into winter. And the manifesto is a good place to start, because when I came up with the idea of quiet disruptors, I thought the best place to start exploring that was by saying why. Who are they and why are they important? So here we go. The Manifesto for Quiet Disruptors, because it's time to change the conversation for good. Have you noticed we're shifting from one era to the next, from the modern industrial age with linear and predictable answers to a complex and interconnected and volatile world, where what we do affects who others become and impacts our whole environment without us fully realizing it. We need different voices, people with fresh things to say who don't need to shout. Not just superheroes with confident gestures, nor the loud, always-on culture with quick answers that offer attractive sticking plasters, yet fail to see what comes next or why we're doing it anyway. But the thoughtful and creative change makers who look from the edge and craft their responses, who want to make a difference differently, not just for today, because more of the same just won't do. So now is our time to shift the conversation by becoming the change we want to see, owning our voice, finding the others, and having the courage to speak softly about things that matter. Because only people make change, and change emerges with those who have the courage to be different, who think before they speak, who ask questions we'd sometimes rather not hear, who create solutions we hadn't expected, who see more from the edge than the center, and make connections that surprise us, who are driven to make a difference, but want to do it differently with grace, who get their energy from calm reflection, beautiful ideas, and taking the long view, who exercise kindness, generosity, and stubborn courage in pursuing a different way of looking, being, and doing that can turn our world upside down for the better. It's time for the new change makers, the quiet disruptors with the courage to speak softly about things that matter.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I've heard you speak it now a couple of times, and every time I hear something new, of course.
Interesting. Interesting.
But I think there are a couple of things that I'd begin with. I think once upon a time, being a male and being part of the corporate world, which is where I began my career a long time ago now, but in the 70s and 80s we're talking about, we're very much a male-dominated culture where the loudest people tended to be the leaders. And I was kind of raised in that environment. But I guess the older that I got, and if I can say it with some humility, the wiser I've become, the less louder I am. And I think in the new world of work, part of what's going on is that people in general, women in particular, but people in general, and a lot of good men are in this space. We don't want the bluster anymore. We don't want the bullshit, if I might say it.
Yeah.
We don't want loud. We don't want in your face. What we want is more careful, more caring, more considered, more compassionate, more conscious conversation.
Yes.
And I know in my own career, when I left the corporate world, and as you know, I had a long career as a professional speaker, but in the last decade, my focus has been on conversations. And when I began this work a decade ago, my focus was on candid. And what I noticed, and people gave me feedback, that was still loud. And a lot of people didn't want candid as in loud. And so what happened was, and this was really organic, but the conversation started to become convivial as well as candid. And then they became compassionate as well as convivial and candid. And then they became conscious. And of recent times, they become compelling. And it's that sort of combination.
Yes.
And it's much more gentler and yet much more powerful. It's bolder and yet it's not brassy, if you know what I mean.
It's more courageous. You have to have a level of courage, personal courage, to step into the space of saying, I don't have all the answers, or I'm exploring this, and these are the kinds of things I'm thinking about, but I might not be right about it.
No.
And I think that takes real courage. In one sense, certainly what I've experienced historically is that it's far easier to put on the Superman outfit and say, it's all right, I know the answer, because that's what was expected of leaders. Leaders were expected to be the ones who knew what was going on and had the answer quickly, because we were in an age, in an era when it was assumed that there were answers, and if you didn't have the answer, well, you weren't very good as a leader, were you?
That's one of the big shifts, I guess. A couple of things just before we came online, I was watching an interview with Ryan Holiday on television, who's the Courage is Calling guy, and it's the book. It's his latest book, and I'm probably halfway through the book, and I didn't know he was going to be on. I was just sitting with my wife there. We're having dinner, and we just put there's a show on, and there he is. But one of the interesting things that he talks about in the book is that the reason we don't have courage is because of he says fear is an enemy of change, of courage. Yeah. And one of the reasons is we fear what other people think is a big part of that fear. Yeah. And I know that one of the shifts that I'm really seeing is that the wisest leaders don't have the answers. Yeah. What they do have is a lot of questions.
Oh, absolutely, Ian. Absolutely.
And when questions are asked and the answers are up for everyone to work on and decide, it's a very different environment to how it used to be, because you'd say, hey, boss, and you would expect the boss to give you the answer. Yeah. Whereas one of the shifts I've seen is that the best bosses don't give answers. They ask great
I
questions.
think that's really interesting, and I think you're right. Um, uh, and I've seen that in all sorts of places. I think one of the other shifts that is in parallel with that is that employees, members of the team, have expected to go to the boss and get the answer.
Yeah.
In fact, it almost, we were in an era when for someone else to have an answer was really not a very good thing.
Some would say a career-threatening move in those days.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, it was. And it, yeah, I think it's really interesting. So, and there's also another even more subtle shift that I've seen happening as well, is this move from the boss has got to have all the answers. We've gone to a place where it's okay for a peer or an employee or a subordinate to come with some answers. But we're now moving into the place, I think, in some really enlightened places where the employee will come with the issue and the questions, and together the manager and the team member will work on the solution.
Yes. Yes.
Because do you remember we were in an era when the mantra was, don't tell me the problem, just give me the answer. No, don't come to me with the problem, just tell me the answer. Yeah. And actually, I think this goes back to this question of courage yet again. I think it takes huge courage, an enormous amount of bravery to acknowledge just how complex and difficult to understand and rapidly changing the environment is. Because the reason why I say that is that I think that gets to the heart of it gets to the heart of control. And I think a lot of our sense of what leadership and what business leadership is about is having control. I know what's going on. I can anticipate where the needs are. I know how to solve this problem. And I think it takes just a huge step of being vulnerable to be saying, actually, this is this is not simple. There isn't an answer just out there waiting for us to find. So who do we need to have in the conversation to actually start working on what our next step is? Because it's no longer the usual suspects. No. It's no longer just those people we're used to having in the room.
True, and I think part of that too is that the Industrial Revolution gave us command and control and divide and conquer.
Oh, absolutely.
And it also dehumanized people.
Absolutely.
And we've been suffering a hangover ever since. And I actually scoff at the talk of fourth and fifth industrial revolutions, because I don't think we need any more industrial revolutions. What we need is a re-humanization of the workplace.
Yes.
And part of what's happening, and I'm blessed that I have some clients who are at the forefront of this process, is that people have realized, even though we've known this for a long time, that people don't leave organizations, they leave bosses. Yeah. And the pandemic, has really highlighted this.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people are saying, look, the status quo is actually not serving us anymore. So there's pushback against, you know, the political line or the corporate line or whatever. And people say, well, I don't want to play by those rules anymore. I actually want to look at different ways to work. And so the priority list I'm seeing for employees is they're saying, I'm not going to be bullied anymore.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm not going to be controlled.
I'm not going to be put in a box anymore.
Another
way of saying it, because I think, and I think this is, obviously I've given quite a lot of thought to why I think that we're seeing an emergence of quiet disruptors. I think there have always been quiet disruptors around. You know, you look back into history, and there are people who were deeply thoughtful people who looked widely, who were driven by their values and by their passion, and they didn't want to just sit at the side, but they wanted to make a difference, because that's the kind of core things. They're kind of the reflective, quiet, think before you speak, but driven by values that actually means that people who might naturally carry on sitting at the sidelines and observing and saying, oh, well, what a mess, but just sit there doing that. The disruption thing, the values actually are causing people to say, I will do something. You know, I will go out of my comfort zone and speak up, or I will challenge, or I will whatever. So I think we've always had people who are quiet disruptors. But what I'm noticing is that there are many more people. And what happened when I started talking about quiet disruptors back in 2018, I sort of, to be honest, it was just an easy way of me saying who I was. I needed a shorthand because my backstory was too complicated. I started using the phrase just as a way of saying, hello, this is who I am. And I was really surprised at people's responses. Because I think I expected some pushback. I think I expected people to be saying, oh, what do you mean? Quiet and disruption? Yeah. How do you know? How do you measure it? You know, that kind of stuff. But actually, that isn't what happened. What happened was there was this pause as these two words that you normally just do not put together landed. And people, it was obviously they were doing this process, but then what happened was that a number of people, instead of saying, what do you mean? They took the phrase for themselves and started to try it on for size. And the conversation shifted, and it shifted completely, because it shifted to people saying, do you mean I can be disruptive? I can make change, but I don't have to do it in the, you know, the superhero loud. I don't have to get up on a soapbox. I don't have to be in the center of everything and shouting my head off, or, you know, doing it this way. I can do it my way. And suddenly there were these people saying, oh, this gives me permission. Just the phrase started to give people permission. So when I then wrote the manifesto and then started looking and was looking around and seeing, so who's out there that you might name as being a quiet disruptor, what I realized was actually they were all over the place. They were in you know, so many different areas. But what I also noticed was that they were becoming more visible. Now, part that, you know, that might just be that I was looking for them, but I think not. I think it's, as I've looked at it, I think it's been a shift that's been going on. And I think that shift has got two drivers. One is that the industrial system is broken.
Yeah.
And the way of leading in that industrial system is broken.
Yeah.
So we're going through, we are going through this big shift, and it's being seen in so many different places and different ways. But the other thing is, I think people are changing. I think people are saying, I don't just want to be in this box that you've put me in.
No.
I want to be more authentic to who I am. I don't want to feel this disconnect between who I am and what I do in my day job. No. And what I think is really interesting is that the pandemic and the whole shift, the shake-up that's meant, has loosened the links between, if I work, I have to sit in somebody else's box, and in that sense, minimize who I am, limit my contribution, to now saying, actually, I'm not sure I'm going to carry on doing that for the rest of my working life. And this whole thing about the Great Resignation that I know you've been thinking about and writing about, I think is a big part of this, which is people have, through the pandemic, suddenly had the time, the headspace, the experience of doing work. Well, I think they've done two things. They've either had a really big experience of doing work differently and are saying, actually, this is important to me. I'm not going to go back and just become a cog in a wheel again. And if you want me to come back and really give myself to working with you, then actually you need to take the whole of me, and I've got much more to offer than just doing what you're telling me to do, because actually I can see things, I've got ideas, I've got perspectives, and I want meaning to what I do. I don't just want to work for a paycheck. I want to work for value. I want to work for meaning. But the interesting other thing is that those people who've been whose experience of the pandemic has been in healthcare.
Where you're a former chief executive in the space.
I was a chief executive in the National Health Service for 10 years. And obviously I still have a lot of connections back in there. And, they have been extraordinary. The doctors, the nurses, the porters, the orderlies, the paramedic, the whole raft of people, they have absolutely worked their socks off. And what I saw early on in the pandemic was, because it was in such a state of nobody really knew how to do this, and they were dealing with stuff where they couldn't wait for the higher up to tell them what to do. They started to get on and do things, and what I saw was an explosion of initiative, an explosion of insights, of ideas. And if you look at what happened, it was things that used to take us 10 years, 15 years to see change, whether that's in vaccine development, whether that's in better people, how we do it, the patient flows, the whatever. All that happened in months, not years. And that's because we took the lid off, enabling people to work together to solve problems which no one person could solve.
No, I've seen it.
And I think it's just been extraordinary. But the problem now is, number one, controls coming back in again. So it's all go back and sit back in your box, and they're exhausted. And they're saying, actually, I can't keep working in this old way.
No,
I'm working.
The genie's out of the bottle, though, Sue. And I think
it is.
What I'm seeing is a couple of things. The number one thing, and I've been asking people this now for a decade, what is it that you want from your work?
Yeah.
And the number one answer by 100 miles is, I want to feel valued.
Absolutely.
And part of that is, I have value and I want to bring more value, but I want to feel valued in Bloomington. So I basically put this trilogy together. That it's about people feeling valued, it's about people living values, and it's about people delivering and exchanging value. Now, what underpins that I'm finding is that people are realising, particularly women and younger people, but also, some old blokes like me, people are saying, I've actually got a voice.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
And I want you to hear me.
Yes.
And so my work, as you know, is centered in, I call it essence. There's lots of, you could call it a song, you could call it a voice, call it music. There's all some wonderful metaphors. But, and of course, Stephen Covey wrote about this I think his best book, The Eighth Habit, about gratitude, where he talks about finding your voice.
Yeah.
And that work was very inspirational for me as I've worked to, because I've had men and women come to me and say, look, I've got something to say. Will you help me to say it?
Yes.
I've got more to contribute. Will you help me to do that? Yeah. And it's been fascinating work, because in all of that, people are finding more meaning in their work.
Absolutely.
More
because
appreciation
they are,
for that.
Yeah, because, and this is probably the most significant shift, isn't it? We are moving from a place where people were just thought about as resources. It's the same extractive process that we've done to the natural environment,
or even worse, assets or capital. Terrible expressions.
No, absolutely. And we're moving from that to, and I love the phrase that or the words that you use, which is about humanizing work. And it's seeing people as people who aren't cogs, who have something extraordinary to offer. But we as leaders at times need to be more conscious about how we give them the space to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the shift.
It is the shift. It is the shift. And if I think of one very, very clear example of that, is that we've been in an era where he who speaks first, he who speaks loudest, he who has the first answer, is the one that's valued, and usually the one that's promoted.
That's of course been the way, but it's not the way anymore. I remember when I first started doing this work in 1990, a lot of people thought I was crazy. And I must admit, when I looked in the mirror in the first couple of years,
I'd call you innovative, Ian.
I
would call you a front leader on this.
Well, when I looked at my bank account in those first couple of years, I started thinking I was crazy as well. But what I've seen slowly, surely, is there has been a shift.
Yeah.
I once told a group of chief executives in a workshop that I thought management was dead, and that the idea of trying to manage people was an oxymoron. And I basically got laughed out of the room in 1990.
Yeah.
People aren't laughing anymore.
No.
Because there's a realization that people can't be managed. People must be led.
Processes can be
Processes
managed.
is the new management.
Absolutely.
Practice is the new management. But and so this is now becoming a mainstream idea. Back then, people thought I was off my head.
I'm glad you kept your head, because we've needed that. We've needed that. Yeah.
Interesting that one of my first book, the year 2000, it was called Increasing Profits Without Hurting People.
Oh, yeah.
It's out of print now, and the good ideas have made their way into my subsequent books. But the second book was actually, which I wrote in 2005. It was called What Real Leaders Do and Fake Ones Don't.
Oh, yeah.
It's also out of print now as well. And again, the ideas have moved on. But interestingly, when I was in the speaking industry, that was my most popular presentation for
Yeah.
the year before the book came out, 2004, up until I started winding down my speaking like a decade later.
Yeah.
Because, and that was the shift.
Yeah.
When
Absolutely.
15 years after I first started, no one really interested. 15 years later, everyone's interested because most people were realizing the way we've been leading is not working anymore.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way. And so there was a, I guess I was fortunate. There was a bit of a zeitgeist in that time.
Yeah.
And I think now what's happened is that employees now, there's a wave of people saying, I'm not going to take this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be mistreated.
Yeah.
I want you to see me as a unique, one of a kind human being. I want you to value me. I want you to listen to me. I want you to pay attention to me. I want flexible working hours. You know, there's a lot, there's now a long list. But there's not
There is,
ranting,
but
raving about this though, which is why I love your work. It's more of a quiet, momentum building. It's a movement.
yeah. Yeah. And actually, in that sense, Ian, it has to be, because that's recognizing the fact that change is fundamentally organic.
Yeah.
If change isn't organic, then it's like a sticking plaster.
Yeah.
And it can come off when it gets too wet.
Which is principally why change management doesn't work, because most change
absolutely
is exactly that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
The
I
three
agree.
great oxymorons, I call them: strategic planning, change management, and performance management. They're all oxymorons.
They are. They are.
And I think there's now a realization, you know, becoming maybe mainstream in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's causing, I think, a lot of chaos.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of complexity around this. But as with all chaos and all complexity, in the end, there's a clarity that emerges. There'll always be chaos and complexity, and it's that dance will always be going on. But I'm just noticing a clarity about the way a lot of employees are speaking now about the kind of work they want to do. I want it to be meaningful for me.
Yes.
I want it to be valuable for other people. I want to be
Yes.
appreciated and seen for my value.
Yeah, yeah. And therefore, conversely, it's those leaders who are prepared to stand in the middle of this maelstrom of confusion, complexity, uncertainty. It's those who have the courage just to keep standing and avoid the tendency, which is, I've got to rescue this.
Yes,
because actually we can't rescue it, but what we can do is hold a, almost like hold a place of safety, or open a place of safety for employees and peers. And because of course this is not just about one person doing this is about creating in any organization a network of people who are prepared to stand while everything else is going in flux around them, so that people can find their feet again, so that they can learn, or to use a different metaphor, a metaphor that I've been finding quite useful. If we think about the old industrial era, the industrial age, the way of doing things that was very concrete and very linear, you know, it was cause and effect. If you do that, then this happens. This is how you do leadership. This is how you do management. This is how you do performance. All very concrete, all very, I can stand with my, you know, I can stand on ground on this. I think that where we're moving into is if you use a river analogy, we're moving from the place where we've got our feet on the riverbed to a place where we're learning how to swim in the flow. And the thing about that is you can't touch the ground. In fact, if you're swimming in a river and you try to touch the ground, actually you'll end up being in a dangerous position.
Yeah. Which is a wonderful thing. I read I forget the author, but it really struck me, and I've been doing my best to live this way. But the idea is it's not about being in the flow, it's being flow.
Yeah. But you can't be flow until you have let go enough to be in the flow.
Indeed. And so it's really a surrendering, I've found, to the old ways.
Oh, absolutely.
And that really takes we come back to this word again, courage, and that's why I'm loving Ryan's book, because the title is Courage is Calling, but of course the subtitle is Fortune Favours the Brave.
Yes.
Which we know is an old adage.
Yeah.
But I'm finding it very inspiring to be able to work with brave people who once upon a time wouldn't speak, but are now feeling enabled.
Yes.
And my work has evolved. My own essence, I came to realise a while ago, was my gifts are around holding space.
Yeah, they are.
And what I've noticed as I've worked with this and developed my own skills around it is that I'm spending a lot of time listening and observing.
Yeah.
And a lot less time speaking.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I'm sure you find this when we host conversations, which is what I now do for a living, I'm saying a lot less.
Yeah.
The groups that I've been working with, we've been playing with the essentialism idea of less but better.
Yeah.
And it's been a long journey. I had a couple of mentors that introduced me to the essentialism book, and I really love this idea of less but better.
Mm.
And it's kind of, I know some people, even as recently as this week, we're helping one of the members of one of our groups who really has this big role in helping his organisation to see there's a better way forward.
Yeah.
And we've been working on the pitch.
Yes. Yeah.
And helping this guy to, and it's interesting that from where he first started, there were PowerPoint slides and there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But now he essentially has a manifesto about the same length as yours that when he says it gives you goosebumps.
Yeah.
And because it's come from the heart.
Absolutely, Ian.
And so we're pretty confident when he has the opportunity to talk to the people that he's been invited to speak to, that it will resonate, because that's the other shift. Even some of the most stubborn, old world bosses are changing their ways.
Yeah. It's very interesting. That was I do very short blog posts every day.
Which are wonderful. A little on LinkedIn. You post them as well.
just a short thought, a pause point with a image from here in the valley.
Yeah.
And this morning's, which I wrote last night, is actually all about that, which is we don't have to have all of the words.
No.
And there are times when actually it's really important that we sit with the discomfort of grappling with the words, because they're not easy. And the reason why that's important is because as we do this kind of grappling and I'm going to say groaning, but you know what I mean? It's not, oh yeah, one of those words, here we are, here it looks like. But when we do that kind of deeper work on the words, actually it becomes part of us in a way that if we simply could describe it, it wouldn't be us in the same way. And that's why people can hear us, because it's not just words.
No,
it's
but
something, it's something we've labored over.
Yeah, it's like I mean, that's labor. I mean, in our family, we have an English, German, Scottish kind of heritage, but my father went back to about 1200, and as far as we can tell, the family once had a crest,
Yes.
and ours is nothing without labor.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I guess it's in my DNA to come to the kind of places that you and I are coming with the people that we work with. It takes labor.
It does.
It takes work.
It does.
And
it does. But the most significant part of that work is the emotional work, is the work we do on ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to say the personal work.
In the personal work, yeah, that's right. That's a better way. The personal work, because I absolutely know, both from my own experience of leadership, and my study of leadership, that what people respond to is not the clever words.
No.
It's not even the right answers, because
one of our members in the Wise Leaders peer group the other day, there was a little pause, and we've got very comfortable with silence in our groups, because it's a powerful thing, as you know. But he said, you know what? He said, what we're about here is being better humans.
Oh, yeah.
And there was I'd almost say there wasn't a dry eye in the house, because it resonated with everyone. Because really, at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about.
Yeah.
The new world of work is about being better humans.
It is.
I think the future of the world is about being better humans.
I agree.
And the secret sauce maybe is that it's in our stories and in our conversations where this emerges. I've been a student of stories most of my life. My mother used to say, you can talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles. And I had my grandparents and a lot of my family were storytellers, and so it was in the blood right from those early days. But stories, I've been really looking closely at the Indigenous stories of late. The Native Americans, I've always had an interest in. I've been studying our own Aboriginal culture here recently. A wonderful book called Sand Talk really got me going in this area. And right at the moment, I'm reading a book by our friend Richard Merrick. He recommended, braiding the sweetgrass.
Oh, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Yes.
But one of the things that comes out of those books and other works is that when you tell a story, you don't need to give an explanation. And this has always been the Indigenous way. And I found that very enlightening. But of course, what does happen when somebody shares a story is that a conversation follows. And when that's allowed to flow, and it's a heartfelt conversation, then things emerge about a way forward. It's quite fascinating. I introduced my groups to the Benjamin Zander idea, The Art of Possibility, which is still one of my all-time favorite books.
Yeah.
And Benjamin has a wonderful video called Shining Eyes, which all of the people I work with, it's a must-do to look. There's only one must-do, watch the video. Because the idea of shining eyes is a wonderful way of being better humans.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to your work in
Oh, that would
the
be
post that goes with this video, but I'll put that in there too. But in that, he says that, you know, the art of possibility is really that. It's about doing whatever we do, resulting in shining eyes from other people. A wonderful way of looking at it, in my view.
It is. It is.
I wonder, Sue, we're probably getting towards the sort of top of our time. I wonder some observations that you might see with the people that you write for and the people that you work with, some observations you might see about some ways forward, what, you know, some insights into what some people are doing, what you're observing as I guess keepers, you know, things that are going to stand the test of time.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Just building on everything that you have said about being human and recognizing our humanness and celebrating our humanness in every aspect, and particularly in the world of work. That just leads me to two things, really. One is that I think people are wanting to be seen and heard. And what I'm finding from both how the book has landed and how other things that are associated with the book, other writing or other speaking, is that the number of people who come back and say, oh, I just feel seen and heard. And that has opened their belief in their own possibility. It's opened their belief that actually they have something to say that is important, that they actually have a contribution. So what I'm finding is that those places, those people, those leaders, those organizations, those businesses who are serious about creating space for their people to be seen and heard.
And I might add, and understood.
And understood, absolutely. Yeah, but you can only understand someone if you see them and hear them, and then engaging in the conversation that opens up, rather than saying, which is what so often has been the case before, okay, fine, on to the next thing. Yeah. Or I understand what it is you're saying. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you need this courageous humility, this compassion to actually say, no, tell me some more. But the problem is, if we do not create the space, if organizations are not creating the space, then actually all they're doing is paying lip service to being seen and heard. So I'm seeing that those places that are recognizing, those leaders who are recognizing the importance of creating this kind of space for proper conversations. And I just want to therefore translate that also into, come on, let's have a meeting revolution. You know, the way we do meetings historically has been abysmal. What a waste. What a...
In some organizations, worse during COVID. I have I have stories from people who I know well who are, you know, they're basically, they need permission to leave their computers and go to the loo.
Yeah, absolutely. So this again goes back.
Meetings at horrendous times. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that those places that are having, those people that are having these insights and are saying, we need to create better, more meaningful, more purposeful spaces to be having this exchange. So the stuff that used to fill meetings, which actually can be done in a completely different way, rather than saying everybody's got to come and just sit and listen.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a good, that's not seeing and hearing people.
No.
That's still treating them like cogs in a wheel, where you've got to take a register like in a child's class, you know, were you here? Tick, you know. That's present, what do you call it, presentism, you know. No, we need
Presenteeism, I think you might be referencing.
presenteeism, that's the word. Yeah, we need to move beyond that. So what I'm seeing is those organizations that are starting, those leaders who are starting to see both their role and their people and the people they are serving in a very different way. You know, they're using different lenses. They are the ones who I'm really paying attention to, because I think they're the ones who are going to be bringing in this regeneration of the work environment.
Yeah, regeneration is a nice word, and I think one of the flow-ons will be the regeneration of the planet.
They go hand in hand, Richard. They go hand in hand in a way that I think there are some key voices who are starting to. There have always been people who've talked like this,
yes,
but I think there are more people, and there are more people who can articulate it at the level at which, you know, the you and me and the others of the world can hear, rather than feeling like you've got to join this academic club.
I pulled out a favorite book. I haven't yet. I pulled it out to reread it, but because I remembered it from a very long time ago, and it's still on my shelves. And it's a book by Thomas More, and it's called The Reenchantment of Everyday Life.
Oh, that is lovely.
I think, as I say, I think the book was written probably in the 80s, so it's a while, but I noticed it on my shelf the other day, and I thought I must reread that, because I think that's what I see happening in our world today, and it's coming through the creation of safe, curious, safe places, spaces, places.
It is spaces.
It's coming through the total reinvention of meetings.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also coming in enabling people to have a life.
Absolutely. And the thing that I would add to those things is that the other significant shift that I'm seeing, and I'm really heartened by, is the recognition that growth at all costs and scaling at all costs is being seen for what it is, which is a product of industrial thinking.
Yeah, falsehood.
Because, and therefore, the sense of the new localism. Because if we're talking about rehumanizing, if we're talking about having places and workplaces where people thrive, then actually they have to be at a human scale. And the mantra of, well, we do it like this everywhere, just doesn't work.
No, we celebrate, our politicians, certainly the conservative ones, celebrate continuous economic growth as though it's this wonderful thing. What they don't appear to realise is that it's been soul destroying and planet destroying.
Absolutely. So I think there is the other thing that I'm seeing is this kind of greater sense of connection to place and the people. And by place, sometimes that place is actually a virtual place.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a physical place. But, you know, if you think about, well, if I think about, if I'm in a meeting or if I'm in a session with hundreds of people, actually I'm just an observer. If I'm in a group of 6, 8, 10 people, or in a meeting of 20 where I can see everyone, that's a place. That's a place where I and others can flourish, where people can be, where I and you can be seen and can be heard.
Yeah.
And the solutions, the ways of doing things that we might come up with might look quite different from the group down the road.
Yes. And I think
actually,
it reminds me
okay.
that Margaret Mead had it right all those years ago.
Yeah.
It's only a small group of people that change the world.
Yeah.
And there was a wonderful book, E.F. Shoemaker, if I recall, Small is Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He was an economist who actually got the economy.
Yeah, he did.
One of the interesting reflections I've had in my lifetime, I'll be 68 in a couple of weeks. And I remember when I was growing up, we were a society and the economy was part of that society. We've gone the other way. And I sense one of the shifts is we're moving back to, we will be a society once again.
Yeah.
Even though a former prime minister of yours denied that there was such a thing.
Oh.
She has been proven to be incorrect, shall we say. But
yes,
I'm seeing a shift back now where society and human needs and the planet's needs are back where they belong.
And with that, so I think that the shift, how that shift is being articulated, I think people are looking for meaning.
Yeah.
But they are also looking for belonging.
No doubt.
And I'm completely convinced that our work environments, our working teams, our workplaces can be places of belonging.
No doubt.
As we see the whole person.
Yes. That's
if we don't want the whole person to show up, it won't be a place of belonging.
No, which is probably a wonderful place to sort of end our conversation. I'm going to put links to your work, Sue, in a post that accompanies this video, and we will welcome ongoing conversation.
Absolutely.
It's
been a delight
in that space.
Yeah.
So, folks, it's been my great pleasure to have Sue Heatherington as my guest today. There's a lot of value in what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And Sue, I look forward to speaking with you again next time, and maybe next time we will have that small 8 to 10 people, which is how I work.
That would be good.
And we'll continue the conversation. But thanks again.
Well, thank you for having me.